How you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you so much. And lovely event so far. Been learning a lot. So good morning slash afternoon slash evening, everyone, depending on your time zone. My name is Syamantak, and even people back in my hometown mispronounce it. So, have at it. It's fine. And today we'll be talking about accessibility. A little bit of myself. I'm from Kolkata in India. I have got a cat and a dog. The cat kind of raised the dog, so she's like running on cat software. You know what I mean? I work as a UX designer at Play Simple Games, which is a small Indian studio owned by MTG. We mostly make casual word games, including this one. This one is called Word Search Explorer. This is my baby. So, being a casual word game, it is very popular with the slightly older demographic. And naturally, we threw in certain design decisions that would help them. And it had several other effects. So, this made me think that sometimes we think that accessibility has these very hard guidelines, right? You need to design this way for this kind of audience. But a lot of the designs decisions we made to make our game easier or more easy to control, that ended up having a lot of good effects, and a lot of people had very nice and kind words, and that set me down this specific path. I'm very new to this, but of course, the pursuit of good accessibility is a journey, and I hope to help some of you who are also new to this along a little bit. So, straight off the bat, let's set up certain boundaries, right? We are talking about general games. We're not going to talk about specific cases like, for example, a learning educational game for someone with cognitive impairment, right? We're talking about general games. I'm going to assume that you have already done one round of basic accessibility checks. And because of time constraints, we'll only look at the context of mobile games. First up, how do we define accessibility, right? The way I would define accessibility is if when I say I mean you, I mean him, her, them, all of them, right? So if I can perceive it using my senses, regardless of my background, regardless of my identity, my capabilities, if it is within my capabilities to reach it, process it, comprehend it, and there are no impediments, physical or social, that keep me from it. That's what I would define as accessible, right? Now, before we get into this, again, a couple of things. First, we accept defeat. We accept that we can't wake up one day and immediately solve something for everyone. Accessibility is a long drive rather than a sprint. And the second thing, very important, is to empathize but not assume. When I'm designing for my game, I'll look at the demography and be tempted to think that, hey, these people are playing the game for with various motivations, right? They're probably slightly older, so they're probably keeping their brain active or staving out dementia, and I would be totally wrong, as you see, right? So definitely empathize with the players, see where they're coming from, but no way can we assume why they're playing your game. For all we know, they just blindly enjoy it. Now, accessibility research. So this is again a very, very deep topic, but the outlines are pretty straightforward, right? Understand who you're designing for, understand who your players are, the demography, the geography, especially, and see why they're coming to your game. Talk to them, listen to them, and if you get the opportunity, just bring them in your studio, involve them heavily in the process. Like every game that has done this always has had excellent feedback from the community. Right. We start off with physical accessibility, in particular, mobility. So, in a lot of our games, we tend to address mobility by simply making the game turn based or waiting for players' input. But there is a certain joy of having a timer or having a certain threat, right? There is a certain thrill that is there, and we want that feeling to be accessible, right? You can do that by relaxing your timers a little bit, and if there's an emergency button that the player is required to press, just make sure that button is nice and big, right? Big round button. Another thing is if your game involves strategy and multiple inputs, right? One thing you can do is, of course, keep a tactical pause where the player can pause, take their time to process all the information, set out a chain of commands, and then watch it unfold. Or if you know there are certain inputs the player is going to make anyway, like blindly mashing a button or just holding down the accelerator in a racing game, it may be a good idea to automate that part since you know the player is going to be doing it anyway, right? So the player can focus on the other controls or enjoy the game more, the story more, the visuals more. Now, vision, motion sickness, something I actually ended up coming across in my word game because it has a grid rotation function. And in mobile games, there's only so much you can reduce the field of view because it's already a pretty small screen. So the idea is that if you reduce the proportion of the animated bit on the screen, our extremely weird brains automatically see the rest of the phone screen as a background. So they think they're on stable ground, and that helps mitigate somewhat the effect of motion sickness. Subtitles. Uh, Chances are, if there's speech in your game, you already have subtitles. And there have been some great talks about subtitles in this conference in the past few years. I've picked up a couple of salient points from there. One is to keep the subtitles near the area of player focus, so that way the player's eyes are not darting back and forth, reduces eye strain, easier to focus as well. And if you want them to actually read subtitles rather than scan them for key information, you may want to highlight all the keywords. Next thing is silent mode. Uh, Play your game with the sound off, and if the experience is functional, I think you're doing great. The main thing is that sonic cues usually should be accompanied by either visual or vibration or some other kind of feedback, ideally, because unlike other cues, sonic feedbacks are not really standardized, right? So they almost always require context. And of course, use mono audio over stereo audio if possible, if that's not a technical impediment. Um, if you want a use case, I have my favorite pair of wired earphones. It's like 12 years old, but only one of them work. So please think of me and keep mono audio. Cognitive accessibility. We start off by looking at typography, right? Because that's one of the most important decisions that you take when you're designing an interface. Pretty straightforward though. You think about fonts that have good distinct letter forms. And when you are creating the UI, when you're setting down the UI guidelines, you make sure you have sufficient tracking. That basically helps players identify each letter when they're scanning through. And the second thing is recognition over recall, a statement we have heard many, many times, right? What it means is that games often inundate us with a lot of information. As much as possible, make that information available in the game for the player so that they have to rely less on their memory and they can use other parts of their brain more and better. Now, neurodivergence, it's a vast, vast topic. So we'll look at two very specific cases, right? One will be communication, especially in-game communication. Neurodivergent people typically, I would say, uh, have certain issues with communication, right? Very difficult to generalize, but I can assure you that when you have in-game interactions, be it single player or multiplayer, if you put certain additional visual cues with it, players are better. Their players are more likely to resonate with it better and say things with clearer intent, and that will usually facilitate communication. And of course, if people can talk, people can block. I'm sure you do this already, but always make sure the player can create a safe space for themselves in any chat room. Next is familiar experiences. Uh, well, people seek comfort usually, and comfort lies in familiarity. Oftentimes, we'll find ourselves watching the same shows over and over again, right? Because we seek that familiar feeling. So make sure your game keeps giving players that familiar feeling, even if the challenges increase over time, because that gives them that headspace that they seek all day. Now, coming to emotional accessibility, which mostly talks about diversity and inclusion. Because when you see yourself in a game, that is when you're able to truly realize the vision that the game designer had for you, right? You're able to truly experience the game. So, a couple of things we'll talk about. First is language, right? Whenever you're rendering scripts, you have certain typographic decisions that went into the original interface. Try and carry that forwards into the font that you use for the localized language, because that carries certain personality, certain expression, which should be accessible. And when you're translating something, it's better to translate the thought rather than just directly translate the speech, because so many nuances don't really translate well, right? And the best way to do that is honestly talk to the people who speak that tongue, bring them in. So the next part is diversity and inclusion, which honestly is a massive topic. And most of you here are actually very capable people who have done a lot of really good work on this. I'm only here to tell you that bringing this into your game makes it more emotionally accessible for players. And I have put out two characters who I think are really, really good ways of depicting genuinely relatable, diverse characters. Opinion. Now, before we round up, basically the objective of this is to show you that a lot of these changes that you generally make end up making a lot of improvements on the accessibility front. One is that generally your game is more optimized for players, right? They are spending less time figuring out controls or uh, processing information. They're using more time to enjoy your game that you have so beautifully crafted, and it makes a lot of games easier to complete, right? And I stand by what Xbox said: beating the game on the lowest difficulty is still beating the game. And very, very important thing, when you design for accessibility, you automatically make the experience better for everyone else, right? I've set out a very specific example here that you may create your game in such a manner that it works without audio, and you create it in a manner that it can be played with one hand, right? You have certain impairments in mind when you design those things. But what ends up happening is that you make the commute really, really good for someone else altogether, someone who didn't you didn't immediately visualize when you made those decisions. This is a checklist for YouTube purposes. And I have a bunch of resources here as well that you can snapshot later. Feel free. Uh, Literally 2 days ago, Rovio set out a very nice playbook. I would suggest that you check that out if you can. It's a really nice playbook, very, very nicely written, very lightly organized. And that's about it. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much for this very insightful presentation.